The night my boyfriend turned me into a party prize, I was carrying the cake he had asked me to bake. Mason Reed had texted me at 4 that afternoon. Bring the lemon cake to the Beaumont tonight. The one with the burnt sugar on top. We should talk. We had not spoken in 5 days. Not since Delaney Price came home to Charleston, and Mason began finding reasons to stay out until sunrise. I read we should talk as an apology, so I spent 3 hours zesting lemons and burning my thumb on a springform pan. I put on the white silk dress Mason liked, pinned my hair up, and carried his favorite cake to the roof of his newest hotel. The party had already started. Blue lights moved under the rooftop pool. Champagne bottles flashed in silver buckets. A dozen men in dinner jackets stood at one end of the water, holding bright plastic rings. At the other end, 6 women in swimsuits laughed and posed. Mason was explaining the rules. 1 throw each, he said. Whoever you ring is your date for the after-party. His friends cheered. Delaney sat on the pool ledge in a red dress, her bare feet moving through the water. She had grown up next door to Mason, followed him through every school dance, and left for Europe the year he started dating me. She had been back for 9 days. Mason had slept at home twice. I set the cake on a table. You asked me to come. He glanced over as if he had forgotten. Delaney had not. Nora, she smiled brightly. You should play. I'm terrible at throwing. Her friends laughed before she did. I didn't mean throwing. Delaney pointed to the women in the pool. I meant you should be a prize. The roof went quiet in small ripples. Everyone there knew 2 things about me. My family had lost everything before I finished college, and Mason had rescued me afterward. Only Mason knew the third. I was terrified of deep water. When I was 12, a rip current off Sullivan's Island pulled me under. My father found me face down beyond the breakers. After that, even water over my shoulders could close my throat. I looked at Mason. Tell her! He picked up a neon ring and turned it in his hand. It's a game, Nora! I can't swim! The pool is 4 feet deep. Delaney lifted one shoulder. Unless you've gotten shorter since college. More laughter. Mason walked to a cabana, picked up a black swimsuit, and tossed it toward me. The damp fabric struck the cake box before falling at my feet. Go change, he said. Don't make this into something ugly. I stared at him. 9 years earlier, Mason had sold the vintage Porsche his grandfather gave him and borrowed the rest from his trust to buy my parents' house at a foreclosure auction. He had paid my final year of tuition when the bankruptcy estate froze every account with our name on it. His friends called him my second life. His mother called me the most expensive stray her son had ever brought home. For 9 years I had thanked him in every way I knew. I cooked around his schedule. I smiled through his mother's jokes. I stopped painting when he said the art world was a hobby for people who could afford failure. Apparently, gratitude now required getting into a pool so his friends could throw rings at my body. I picked up the swimsuit and placed it on the cabana chair. Enjoy your party. I had taken 3 steps when Delaney came after me. Nora. Wait, I was kidding. Her hand landed between my shoulder blades. Then she pushed. The sky tipped. My purse slid from my arm. I hit the pool hard enough to lose my breath. Cold water closed over my head. For a few seconds, I was 12 again. There was salt in my mouth, and no ground beneath my feet. I clawed upward, found air, then found the pool floor with one shoe. People were shouting, but no one reached for me. My silk dress had turned transparent. The skirt floated around my waist until I dragged it down with both hands. Delaney crouched at the edge. Oh my God, you slipped. She was still smiling. Mason, I said. He stood 10 feet away, his expression unreadable. Delaney grabbed the rings from his hands. Everybody throw before she climbs out. The first ring struck my shoulder. The second splashed beside my face. Then the whole roof seemed to decide that Mason's silence was permission. Pink, green, and yellow rings flew through the blue light. One caught my wrist. Another landed around my waist and drifted away. A green ring dropped over my head and settled around my neck. The man who had thrown it was Owen Blake, a junior broker who spent every read party trying to make Mason remember his name. Owen went pale. Mason, man. I wasn't trying to. Mason lit a cigarette. The flame briefly sharpened his face. You won her, he said. Take her. No one laughed. I took the ring from my neck. My hands had stopped shaking. That frightened me more than the water. I climbed the pool steps, pulled a towel around my shoulders, and walked directly to Owen. Your car or mine? I asked. His mouth opened. Behind me, glass shattered. Mason had crushed his champagne flute against the table. He crossed the roof, wrapped a second towel around me, and pulled it closed with both fists. You're not going anywhere with him. He won me. I looked up at Mason. Those were your rules. Enough. Don't be so emotional. It was only a game. The anger left his face so quickly, it looked like fear. Then he lifted me over his shoulder and carried me out while everyone watched. By the time Mason's driver reached our apartment on King Street, I was shivering too hard to unlock my seatbelt. Mason carried me upstairs, peeled the wet dress from my skin, and put me into one of his t-shirts. He found the thermometer, cursed at the number, and tucked 2 blankets around me. For an hour, he became the man I remembered. He dried my hair. He made chicken broth badly and burned the first pan. When I refused the medicine, he sat on the edge of the bed and held the glass to my lips. I'm sorry, he said at last. For which part? His jaw tightened. Delaney should not have pushed you, and you should not have told Owen to take me. I knew he wouldn't. That makes it better? I was angry. At me? He became very interested in folding the corner of my blanket. His phone began to vibrate on the nightstand. Delaney's name lit the screen. Mason declined the call. It rang again, then again. On the 4th call, he answered. Delaney did not bother saying hello. Come take me home. My father's furious that I came with you and left with a rideshare. Ask Owen. I don't want Owen. Her voice sharpened. I want you. Mason glanced at me. I had watched that glance for 9 days. It was the moment he measured my pain against her demand and decided how much of mine I would tolerate. Go, I said. Nora, she wants you. He stayed long enough to make leaving look difficult. Then he set the medicine on the table and left. The following evening, I went alone to his grandfather's 75th birthday dinner at the Carolina Yacht Club. I should have stayed home. My fever had broken, but my skin still hurt and a bruise spread across my hip where I had struck the pool wall. Mason's mother had called twice to remind me that families did not advertise private trouble. I understood the instruction. Delaney could push me into a pool in front of 60 people. I was not allowed to look unhappy at dinner. Near the dessert table, I heard Delaney before I saw her. Mason has always had a rescue complex, she told 3 women in jeweled dresses. A bankrupt orphan with big eyes? Of course he brought her home. One woman murmured my name in warning. Delaney ignored her. He says she's grateful at least. Quiet in public, quiet in bed, just very, very grateful. My hand closed around the stem of a water glass. I stepped around the flower arrangement. Did Mason tell you that before or after he left my bed to drive you home? Delaney's smile flickered. I was trying to defend you. Try it without discussing my parents or my sex life. You're overreacting again. She leaned closer. Everybody knows what you are, Nora. A woman who stayed because she couldn't afford to leave. I threw the water in her face. It was not dignified. It felt wonderful. Delaney shrieked. Mason reached us as mascara began to run down her cheeks. He took in the empty glass, her wet dress, and my expression. Apologize, he said. Ask what she said. I don't care what she said. You made a scene at my grandfather's dinner. Delaney pressed herself against his arm. Please don't fight because of me. We are not fighting because of you, I said. We're finished because of him. Mason stared at me. I had threatened to leave before. I had packed bags and let him unpack them. We both knew the ritual. He lowered his voice. Go home. We'll talk when you calm down. No. One small word, and the familiar script between us stopped working. Mason's grandfather was watching from across the room. So were his parents, Delaney's father, and half the hospitality board Mason hoped to lead one day. Mason hated losing control in front of an audience. He turned to Delaney. You wanted to know whether I would ever choose you? Her eyes widened. He took her left hand and removed the emerald signet ring from his own little finger. "Marry me." The room gasped. Delaney began crying before he finished the sentence. Mason slid the ring onto her finger while looking directly at me. "He expected me to break. Instead, I put my glass on the table. Congratulations," I said. "You deserve each other." I walked out before anyone could see that I was bleeding where my fingernails had cut my palm. 5 days later, Mason and Delaney's engagement photographs appeared on every digital billboard owned by Reed Hospitality. In one, she wore a pink gown and rested her hand against his chest. In another, he kissed her forehead beneath a canopy of live oaks. The caption read, "A Charleston love story comes home." I recognized the live oaks. They were in my parents' garden. I drove to Whitaker House so fast I left my phone on the roof of my car. It slid off somewhere near Broad Street. I did not notice. My mother had painted the dining room ceiling herself. My father had built shelves into the back parlor so she could teach free Saturday art classes. For the first 18 years of my life, the house smelled like linseed oil, lemon polish, and whatever my father had burned for dinner. After their development company collapsed, the bank took it. Mason bought it at auction. He told me I would always have a home. Now 2 event trucks blocked the driveway. Pink fabric covered the front columns. Workers were drilling a temporary bar into my father's library floor. Buckets of white roses sat on the porch, and an enormous gold monogram hung over the door. M&D. Inside, my mother's old studio had become a bridal dressing room. Someone had leaned our family portrait against the wall. The glass was cracked across my father's face. I dropped to my knees and pulled the photograph away from a box of candles. "Careful," Delaney said behind me. "The frame is probably full of mold." She wore white shorts, a silk blouse, and Mason's emerald ring. "Get out of my house," she laughed. "Your name is not on the deed." "Where is Mason?" Picking up my dress. "He does sweet things when he's in love." She nudged a rolled-up rug with her shoe. "I told him I wanted a wedding with history. He gave me yours." I stood so quickly the room tilted. "You can have the hotel. You can have every billboard in Charleston. Why this house?" Delaney's expression softened into something worse than cruelty. Satisfaction. "Because it is the one thing you thought he would never give me." The front door opened. Mason entered carrying a white garment bag. His steps slowed when he saw me. "Nora, what are you doing here?" I pointed to the cracked portrait. "You promised this place would be safe. It is safe. There is a bar bolted into my father's floor. It's temporary." He handed the garment bag to Delaney. "You're being emotional about a building nobody has lived in for years. Then hold the wedding anywhere else." The invitations went out. "I don't care." His eyes hardened. "The deed says Mason Reed. I paid the taxes, the insurance, and the restoration bills. You do not get to arrive after all these years and tell me what I can do with my property." He was right about the deed. "That was the ugliest part. He saw my silence and mistook it for surrender. Apologize to Delaney for last night," he said. "Mean it. I'll consider transferring the house to you after the wedding." Delaney smiled behind him. Mason had once saved this house because he could not bear to see me homeless. Now he was holding it over my head until I knelt for the woman who pushed me into a pool. I stopped trying to make him remember the boy who had once saved it. I tucked the family portrait under my arm. "You keep telling me not to be emotional," I said, "so I won't be." I took the apartment key from my purse and placed it on the garment bag. "We're done," he gave a short laugh. "You don't mean that. It's only a breakup, Mason. Don't make it into something ugly." His face emptied. I walked past him. He followed me onto the porch and caught my wrist. "You think you can punish me by disappearing for a week? I'm not punishing you. You have no job. Your savings would not cover 3 months in that apartment. Every hotel, design firm, and gallery in this city does business with my family." His grip tightened. "Where exactly are you going to go?" Before the pool, that question would have stopped me. I looked down at his hand until he released me. "Somewhere you are not." I carried my broken family portrait out through a tunnel of pink fabric. I packed our life into 6 cardboard boxes. Most of the apartment belonged to Mason. The furniture was his, the lease was held by Reed Hospitality, and even the wine glasses had come from one of his hotels. My clothes fit into 2 boxes. My old art supplies filled a third. The remaining 3 held photographs, books, and the small pieces of myself I had forgotten were mine. There was one thing missing. My mother had made me a bracelet when I turned 13. 13 blue glass beads, each painted with a tiny white flower, with a silver paintbrush hanging from the clasp. When Mason crashed his motorcycle in college, I tied it around his wrist before surgery. He wore it for years. I found his watch collection in the closet, but not the bracelet. At Reed Hospitality headquarters, his assistant let me into his office because she had not heard about the engagement yet. Delaney was sitting in Mason's chair. She had the bracelet wrapped twice around her fingers. "Looking for this?" she asked. I stopped in the doorway. "Take it off." It was in his desk. She held it up to the light. "I thought it was one of those cheap little friendship things. My mother made it. Then she should have used stronger string." Delaney pulled. The cord snapped. Blue beads struck the desk and scattered across the hardwood floor. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Delaney nudged one bead with the pointed toe of her shoe. It rolled under a cabinet. I pushed past her and dropped to my knees. 1 bead. 2. 3. My mother's hands had been stained blue for a week after painting them. I could still see her at the kitchen table, holding each bead near the window and squinting at the flowers. Behind me, Delaney sighed. "It's glass, Nora. You can buy more." I stood with 9 beads in my palm. "Some things cannot be replaced just because you can afford a prettier version. Is that what you told yourself about Mason?" I slapped her. The sound cracked across the office. Mason walked in as Delaney put a hand to her cheek. He looked at the beads on the floor, then at me. "Tell me you didn't come into my office to attack my fiancé." "She broke my mother's bracelet." Delaney's eyes filled instantly. It snapped in my hand. She did not even ask what happened. "It was locked in my desk," Mason said. "Why are you searching my office?" I almost laughed. "You know why it was there." He pressed the intercom. Security. 2 guards arrived less than a minute later. One of them had eaten Thanksgiving dinner at our apartment 3 months before. He could not meet my eyes. Mason placed an arm around Delaney. "Miss Whitaker is no longer authorized to enter this floor." I crouched again and collected every bead I could find. 12 of the 13. The last one had rolled somewhere beneath Mason's cabinet. At the elevator, I turned back. "Keep the one that's missing," I said. "You've already kept everything else." Mason's mouth tightened, but he let the doors close. The next morning, the Charleston Heritage Collective withdrew the mural commission I had been promised. The director called it a budget change. By lunch, a hospitality design firm canceled my interview. That afternoon, a gallery owner who had known my mother for 20 years sent me an apology and said Reed Hospitality was reviewing its vendor list. On Friday, a former classmate forwarded me an email from Mason's procurement director. Employing Nora Whitaker in any public-facing capacity would create an irreconcilable conflict with current and future Reed properties. Mason could not keep me from working everywhere. He only had to close the doors in Charleston that still remembered my name. At 2 in the morning, sitting on the floor of my nearly empty apartment, I opened a residency application for an arts campus in Atlanta. The application required 5 recent works. I had 2. I photographed both against the kitchen wall. Then I opened the 3rd box, found a stack of unfinished canvases, and painted until daylight. By sunrise, 3 more were finished. Nobody came into the kitchen to tell me the work would not matter. I submitted the application with paint beneath my fingernails and 12 blue beads in a sandwich bag. The following afternoon, an unfamiliar number called. "Nora?" The man's voice was low and careful. I knew it before he gave me his name. "It's Adrian Cole. Elena Vaughn runs the residency. She remembered your senior show and sent me the application." The last time I had seen Adrian, he was standing outside my college studio with a bouquet of white tulips and a confession I had been too in love with Mason to hear. "I read your portfolio twice," he said. "Tell me you have not promised it to anyone else." Adrian sent a black SUV to Charleston the next morning, complete with a driver named Ellis, cold water in the doors, and enough room for all 6 boxes. "This is unnecessary," I told Adrian when he called. "You're moving your entire life to another state. Georgia is 5 hours away." "Exactly. Too far to hold a painting on your lap." The old Adrian had been quiet and almost severe. He wore black to paint in, spoke only when he had something specific to say, and once stared at a blank canvas for 20 minutes because I asked what blue sounded like. This Adrian teased me before breakfast and owned the glass tower reflected in the car window when we reached Atlanta. I had heard of Coal Capital. Everyone had. The company financed hotels, apartment towers, ports, and half the new skyline between Atlanta and Miami. I had not known that Adrian's family owned it. The Cole Arts campus occupied a converted rail depot near the Beltline. Sunlight poured through factory windows onto print studios, rehearsal rooms, and a gallery large enough to hold a small aircraft. Adrian waited at the entrance in a navy suit with no tie. He was taller than I remembered. His hair was still too long at the front, and he still looked directly at a person when they spoke, as if listening were a physical task. He opened my door. "You cut your hair," I said. "7 years ago. I have been busy." His eyes moved over my face. "I know." He did not hug me. He did not ask about Mason. He took the heaviest box from Ellis and carried it inside. The residency office had prepared a contract. 6 months of studio space, a monthly grant, materials, housing in the loft building across the courtyard, and a public exhibition at the end of the term. The grant was larger than my annual spending allowance from Mason. I read the agreement twice. "What is the catch?" I asked. The program director looked offended. Adrian looked amused. "You have to make art," he said. "Adrian." He dismissed the director with a glance, then sat across from me. "The residency committee reviewed your work this morning. I moved your application to the front because you needed an answer today, but the vote was theirs. The terms are standard. You sent a car before I signed. The car is not in the contract. Neither is whatever you think I owe you." His smile faded. He seemed to recognize a conversation I had been forced to have before. "You don't owe me for helping you, Nora." The simple sentence found the part of me that had been braced for an invoice. People say that before they name the price. "Then don't trust what I say yet." He pushed the contract toward me. "Take the studio, take the apartment. Use the lawyers if Reed tries to interfere here. Watch what I do, and decide later." I looked down at the signature line. There was a strange kind of pride in refusing help. It let no one own you, but it also left you carrying every box alone. I signed. My loft was on the 5th floor, with wide windows and a kitchen larger than the one in Mason's apartment. Fresh sheets covered the bed. Groceries filled the refrigerator. In the studio, someone had stocked the oil paints I used in college, including a rare green pigment my mother once ordered from France. "Standard residency supplies?" I asked. Adrian leaned against the doorframe. "Absolutely not. You remembered the green. You painted every shadow with it for 2 years." I ran my thumb over the tube. Mason had lived with me since college and still bought me watercolor paper for birthdays. Adrian had not seen me in almost a decade. He remembered the color of my shadows. That first month, I painted like someone had opened a locked room inside me. Adrian never entered without knocking. Some nights he brought dinner and worked at the small table while I painted. Other nights, he sent food and stayed away because he could tell I needed silence. When my wrist cramped, he found a physical therapist who worked with artists. When I worried about accepting too much, he showed me the invoices and the residency budget. When Mason sent 30 white roses to my loft, Adrian asked what I wanted done with them. "Give them to the lobby." He did. He did not throw them away dramatically or send Mason a threat. He let the choice remain mine. That made it easier to breathe around him. 6 weeks after I arrived, a courier delivered a legal demand from Reed Hospitality. Mason claimed that 3 of my new paintings depicted Whitaker House and therefore used his private property for commercial gain. Adrian read the letter once. "My legal department can answer." "How much will that cost me?" "Nothing." I gave him a look. "Fine," he said. "One dinner. That sounds suspiciously like a date. I have been waiting since college. I can wait until you decide what to call it. He sent the letter to his attorney. Mason's demand was withdrawn by noon the next day. My first preview exhibition was held 3 months later. I called the collection, What the Water Kept. One canvas showed a white dress beneath blue water, the fabric becoming wings around a faceless woman. Another showed 13 blue beads scattered across a black floor. The largest was a painting of Whitaker House with every window lit and no door in sight. Collectors arrived before the doors opened. Adrian had invited museum trustees, designers, 2 Atlanta developers, and the editor of a national arts magazine. He did not pretend my work had summoned all of them without help. I can put powerful people in the room, he told me. You still have to make them stay. They stayed. The first painting sold in 11 minutes. By the time Mason walked into the gallery, 6 red dots marked the wall. Delaney came beside him wearing white. She had converted their engagement into a lifestyle campaign and documented every cake tasting, dress fitting, and floral meeting for her followers. She stopped in front of the pool painting. You made yourself thinner, she said. Mason did not look at the work. He looked at me in the black dress Adrian's stylist had sent to my loft. So this is the big comeback. You drove 5 hours to see it. I came for a meeting. His gaze moved to Adrian, who was speaking with a museum director across the room. Though I suppose landing a richer man counts as a career now. The old shame rose automatically. Then I remembered the red dots. Adrian gave me a room, I said. My work filled it. That seems to bother you. Mason stepped closer. He gives women rooms. His family owns buildings. Do not mistake square footage for love. Adrian appeared at my side. And do not mistake a deed for ownership of the woman who lived there, he said. Mason's face tightened. This is private. You threatened 3 firms because they considered hiring her. Then your company sent a legal demand over paintings of her childhood home. Adrian held out his hand. Adrian Cole. Mason ignored it. I know who you are. Then you know why your West Harbor Loan Committee postponed tomorrow's vote. Mason's practiced smile slipped. West Harbor was his future. A 200-room waterfront hotel, residences, restaurants, and the promise that Reed Hospitality would finally become more than his grandfather's company. Cole Capital controlled the bridge financing. You froze my project over a woman? Mason asked. We paused review after receiving evidence that Reed executives used vendor contracts to settle a personal dispute. That creates a governance problem. Mason looked at me. You gave him internal emails? Your former assistant did. That part was news to me. Mason laughed without humor. Be careful, Nora. Men like him do not rescue people. They acquire them. Adrian's hand rested lightly against my back. Go, I said to Mason. You'll come home when he gets bored. Which home? I asked. The apartment you owned, or the house you held over my head? Delaney tugged his sleeve as 2 guests began watching openly. Mason let her pull him away. I waited until the gallery doors closed before turning to Adrian. When did you pause West Harbor? Yesterday. Why didn't you tell me? Because the committee had independent grounds to review it. That is a corporate answer. He glanced toward the empty gallery. Because Mason hurt you, and for 10 minutes I enjoyed being the person who could hurt him back. The answer was not flattering, which was why I believed it. I need to know before my life becomes the reason you move millions of dollars. You're right. Mason made choices for me and called it protection. Adrian flinched. I am not Mason. Then don't repeat him. He nodded slowly. The committee can proceed without me. I will recuse myself and have the review limited to the procurement evidence. I thought about Mason at the pool, Mason in my parents' house, Mason confidently listing every door he could close. No, I said. Adrian studied me. Do not cancel the review. Put me in the room with your lawyers and show me what the evidence proves. If you are going to use your power to protect me, I want to see where you aim it. Something warm entered his expression. Tomorrow at 9? Make it 10. I am an artist. We have standards. He laughed. For years I had apologized whenever I needed anything. Now, I was learning to accept help without surrendering the right to direct it. The procurement review did not destroy Mason's company. Real consequences were slower and less theatrical than that. Cole Capital asked Reed Hospitality to explain the emails. 2 board members claimed they had never authorized the threat against local vendors. Mason's procurement director hired an attorney and said Mason had instructed him personally. The West Harbor vote was delayed for another month. That delay cost Mason the first group of condo buyers and put his waterfront land option at risk. He needed new cash before the end of October or he would lose the site. Adrian's attorneys showed me every document that mentioned my name. They explained what was verified, what was accusation, and what the loan committee could legally consider. Then Adrian kept his promise and left the final decision to the committee members who did not work for him. He had enough power to level Mason's life in an afternoon. What made me trust him was watching him stop at the line I drew. After the meeting, he took me to lunch in the private dining room at the top of Cole Tower. Atlanta spread beneath the windows in steel, trees, and October sunlight. "Do you bring all your residents here?" I asked. "Only the difficult ones. I have been extremely cooperative. You argued with 3 attorneys and changed the wording of a $12 million compliance condition. It was poorly worded. It was." He smiled. "That is why they changed it." I looked at the city below us. Mason used to tell me business was too complicated to explain. That usually means someone does not want you to see where the money goes. He said it lightly, but his hand tightened around his coffee cup. "You really hate him." "I hated him in college. You barely knew him." "He had you." Adrian looked at me. I was 20. I considered that sufficient evidence of bad character. I laughed hard enough to startle the waiter. That evening, Adrian asked me to come to his house. Instead of a penthouse, Adrian lived in a brick mansion on 2 wooded acres in Buckhead, set behind iron gates and a security lodge. The entry hall was larger than my old apartment. I turned slowly beneath the chandelier. "You live here alone?" "My housekeeper also considers it excessive." "Your housekeeper is right." He led me past the formal rooms to a narrow gallery at the back. My paintings hung on the walls. There were 11 of them, spaced carefully along the walls. The first was a charcoal study I sold for $80 at a student fundraiser. The second was a stormy marsh I donated after a hurricane. A small oil portrait had disappeared from a college exhibition before I could learn the buyer's name. Adrian had bought all 3. He had also kept 2 sketches I gave him in class and 1 terrible painting of a yellow chair that I had made him promise never to show anyone. "You broke your promise," I said. "I promised not to show anyone else." At the end of the gallery hung one of my mother's paintings. It showed Whitaker House in spring, the front steps covered with fallen magnolia petals. A red-haired girl sat on the porch with a paintbrush between her teeth. Me at 16. This was sold in the bankruptcy auction. "I know." "How did you find it?" "I hired someone." Of course he had. The answer should have made the moment less romantic. It did not. I stood close enough to see the cracks in my mother's paint. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You chose Mason." Adrian's voice came from behind me. "You loved him." I did not want to turn every kindness into an argument for why you should have chosen me. "And now?" "Now I am trying very hard not to make that argument before you are ready." He handed me a small envelope. Inside lay the 13th blue bead. Mason's former assistant had found it beneath the office cabinet when she cleared her desk. She sent it to Adrian's attorney with the procurement email. My eyes burned. "I know people who can restring the bracelet," Adrian said. "Or I can put the bead back in the envelope and never mention it again." I closed my fingers around it. "Have it restrung. All right." "And Adrian?" "Yes?" I kissed him. He went absolutely still. Then his hand settled at my waist, careful for one breath and hungry the next. He kissed me, as if restraint had been costing him something every day. When we finally separated, his forehead rested against mine. "You have no idea," he said, "how many versions of that I have imagined. Any notes? I need more data." I kissed him again. My phone rang in my purse. Mason. I declined the call. Across Charleston, Delaney had just posted that their wedding had been moved forward by 6 weeks. She ended the announcement with a photograph of Whitaker House. Mason called 11 times before midnight. On the 12th, I answered. Mason skipped hello and went straight to an accusation. You're sleeping with him. My life is not your property. Everything was fine until Delaney came back. You ordered people to throw rings at me. I made one mistake. You made one mistake every time you had a choice. He breathed into the phone. Come home, Nora. I'll cancel the wedding. Which home? His silence answered for him. You never meant to give Whitaker House back, I said. I saved it, so you could spend the rest of my life collecting payment. That is not fair. Neither was the interest. I hung up. 2 days later, Adrian asked me what I would do if Whitaker House were mine again. We were eating takeout on my studio floor. He wore a white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, and there was a streak of cobalt paint across one cuff because he had ignored my warning about the wet canvas. I would fix my mother's ceiling, I said. Open the back parlor for Saturday classes again. Turn the upstairs rooms into studios for women who had to stop making art because life got expensive. Would you live there? Sometimes. He nodded, as if confirming a number. Why? I asked. Mason needs $32 million before his West Harbor land option expires. His new lender wants more equity than he has. He is selling assets. I put down my fork. The house? It is held through a separate company. My family office offered to buy that company for $4 million. That is twice what the house is worth. Mason is attached to leverage, not architecture. Does he know you are the buyer? He knows an entity controlled by my family made the offer. He also knows the price disappears Friday. I stared at him. You already offered. Yes, before asking me. An offer is not a purchase. I wanted you to have the choice without making you wait while he destroyed more of it. He slid a folder across the floor. The proposed ownership trust bore my name, Nora Elise Whitaker, sole beneficiary. I had expected a loan agreement, an option, some elegant string hidden in the legal language. There was none. You are giving me a $4 million house. I am buying something that should never have been used to control you. People will say I left one rich man for a richer one. They will. He did not offer me a speech about ignoring them. He waited for my answer. Mason once sold his car to save that house, I said. Everyone treated it as proof that he loved me. If I accept this from you, they will treat it as proof that I am using you. Do you want the house? Yes. Do you plan to stay with me only until the deed records? Despite myself, I smiled. I have not decided. Terrifying. He leaned closer. Take the house, Nora. Take the studio, my attorneys, my plane, every useful thing I can put between you and the people who hurt you. I do not need you helpless to feel needed. I looked at the trust again. Buy it. Mason signed the sale agreement on Friday morning. He received the first transfer that afternoon and wired the money into West Harbor. The agreement allowed his wedding company limited access to Whitaker House through the end of the month, provided it obeyed the preservation rules and paid a security deposit. Delaney did not know the house had been sold. Mason apparently planned to tell her after the wedding. I might have allowed the ceremony to continue. My parents had believed houses were meant to hold celebrations, even for people they would not have liked. Then the property manager sent me a photograph. Delaney's crew had painted over part of my mother's dining room ceiling because the blue flowers did not match her pink decorations. They had also removed the back parlor shelves and left them in the rain. The access agreement prohibited permanent alterations. The deposit had never arrived. My attorney laid out 3 choices. I could demand repairs and let the wedding continue. I could negotiate a larger payment. Or I could terminate their access immediately. Adrian sat beside me and said nothing. This decision was mine. Terminate it, I said. The wedding was 48 hours away. Mason received the termination notice Friday afternoon. He did not tell Delaney. On Sunday morning, her wedding procession arrived at Whitaker House in 3 white limousines and a vintage Rolls-Royce. 2 camera crews waited across the street. A flower truck tried to enter through the service gate. Private security stopped all of them. I watched from the front porch wearing a blue dress and my mother's restrung bracelet. Adrian stood 1 step behind me. Delaney stepped out of the Rolls-Royce in a cathedral-length veil. For a few seconds, she stared at the locked gate, as if it were a mistake the world would correct. Then she saw me. What is she doing here? Mason emerged from the second car. He looked as if he had not slept. Nora, he said quietly, we need to talk. Delaney turned on him. Why does she have security at our wedding? Guests had begun leaving the limousines. Phones appeared. The videographer kept filming until Delaney screamed at him to stop. I walked down the garden path. Your access agreement was terminated after your crew damaged protected parts of the house. My access agreement? Delaney repeated. Mason closed his eyes. Adrian's attorney handed Delaney a copy of the notice. She read the first page, then the second. You sold the house? Mason reached for her. I needed liquidity for West Harbor. The agreement was supposed to let us use it through today. You sold my wedding venue to her? To Adrian's company. I did not know he would put it in Nora's name. Delaney looked at Adrian, then at me. You bought her a mansion? Yes, Adrian said. He showed no embarrassment and made no attempt to make it sound smaller. She's using you, Delaney snapped. Then I am enjoying it enormously. Someone in the crowd laughed. Delaney's face flushed beneath her veil. Mason stepped toward me. I saved this house when no one else would. You let him buy it from under me because you wanted revenge. You sold it, I said. You chose your hotel over the house, just as you chose Delaney over me every time you thought I would still be waiting. I was going to get it back after West Harbor opened. You were going to do a lot of things after I apologized. He lowered his voice. Please let the wedding happen. There are 200 people here. Until a few months ago, I would have protected him from this moment. I would have absorbed the humiliation so he could keep looking powerful. I touched one of the blue beads at my wrist. Don't be so emotional, Mason. It's only a venue. His face broke open. Delaney tore the veil from her hair. This is because of her, she said to him. The loan review, the sale, all of it. You told me she was nothing without you. Mason looked at the guests surrounding us. Not here. You had your procurement director threaten every gallery that tried to hire her. Delaney's voice rose. You made me announce this wedding because you said it would scare her home. You said she would be begging before we ordered the flowers. Behind a hedge, the camera operator lifted his camera again. Mason saw him too late. Delaney, stop talking. You promised me Whitaker House, and you painted over her mother's work, he shouted. You could not leave one room alone? The argument became the kind of truth no publicist could put back into a box. Delaney removed Mason's ring and threw it at him. It struck his shirt and vanished into the grass. Marry your hotel. She climbed into the Rolls-Royce and ordered the driver away. Mason stood in the driveway, while his bride, half the guests, and both families left without him. His father approached last. The board meets at 8 tomorrow, he said. Bring your resignation from West Harbor. Dad, you used company contracts to harass a woman, then sold an irreplaceable property to cover the hole in your project. I cannot fix either decision. He walked away. Mason looked toward Adrian. You think this makes you better than me because your account has more zeros? Adrian came down the final step. No. I think asking Nora what she wants makes me better than you. The money only made the answer expensive. Mason turned to me. I did love you, he said. I sold my car. I fought my family. I stayed when everybody else left. You did, I said. You saved me once, and then you spent 9 years acting as if that purchase included the rest of my life. His voice cracked. If Delaney had never come back, would you have married me? The honest answer hurt more than I expected. Yes, that is what you lost. You'll regret this. I looked back at the house. The gold monogram had been removed. Through the open door, I could see the scaffolding already waiting beneath my mother's damaged ceiling. Not today, I said. Security escorted him to the street. Restoring Whitaker House took 7 months. Adrian paid for the structural repairs and the preservation specialists. I chose every paint color, argued over every light fixture, and made him return a marble bathtub that looked like a Roman emperor's soup bowl. He complained for 2 days. Then he ordered the smaller one. Mason's West Harbor project collapsed after his land option expired. Reed Hospitality did not disappear, but Mason lost the project, his board seat, and the title he had expected to inherit. Delaney posted one tearful statement about choosing herself, then deleted every wedding video except the one at the locked gate. That clip did better than all the engagement photographs combined. I did not watch it again. What the Water kept sold out before the residency ended. Some buyers came because Adrian Cole had attached his name to mine. I knew that. They still had to stand in front of my paintings and want them. I stopped pretending those two truths canceled each other. On the first Saturday in April, Whitaker House reopened as a gallery and studio residency. Children covered the back parlor tables with paper, brushes, and open jars of paint. The restored shelves held supplies instead of wedding favors. Upstairs, 3 artists moved into rooms with sunlight and locked doors of their own. My mother's painting hung in the entrance hall. Adrian had returned it without asking for a receipt. Near sunset, I found him alone on the front porch, loosening his tie while magnolia petals moved across the steps. "You missed my speech," I said. "I heard it from the hallway. You were hiding." Your 8-year-old student asked whether I was the prince who bought the castle. I needed time to recover. I laughed and sat beside him. He took my left hand. The 13 blue beads circled my wrist on a new silk cord. The restorer had repaired the tiny paintbrush clasp, but left the scratches on the silver. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About the house? About letting a suspicious billionaire interfere with your life, constantly. Good. I was worried you had become too trusting." I leaned against his shoulder. For years, people had told me Mason gave me a second life. The story made him generous and me permanently grateful. Even I had believed that surviving meant repaying him forever. Adrian never asked to be called my rescue. He sent a car when I needed to leave, gave me a room when I needed to work, brought in lawyers when someone tried to silence me, and spent $4 million when the thing I loved was put up for sale. He had enough strength to carry me. More importantly, he knew when to put me down. Adrian? That child was wrong. About me being a prince? Devastating. "You did not buy me a castle." I placed the brass front door key in his palm and folded his fingers over it. "You brought me home." Inside, someone knocked over a jar. Children shouted. A teacher called for towels. Adrian stood and offered me his hand. I took it without asking what I would owe. We went in together, tracking magnolia petals across the floor.